European history Europe after World War I of 1914-1918. 1. Europe after World War I of 1914-1918. The Paris Peace Conference of 1919 Versailles Peace Settlement of 1919. The World War I ended on 11/9/1919 when Germany agreed on the armistice ceasefire, i.e. the war was followed by a peace conference of 1919 that was held in Paris, the capital city of France, hence leading the Paris Peace Conference of 1919, also known as the Versailles Peace Settlement of 1919. The Paris Peace Conference of 1919 or Versailles Peace Settlement gathered 27 nations. All a number of countries were represented at Paris Peace Conference or Versailles Peace Settlement except Russia because of the Russian Revolution of 1917. It took 5 months of bargaining and using diplomacy among the Allied powers before the main treaties were ready. The delegates from the Central Powers Triple Alliance members had no share in this discussion and their role was simply to sign the drafted treaties. The conference lasted a little more than a year, i.e. it started on Jan/18/1919 and ended on 21st/Jan/1920. Discussions were confined to the victor powers, i.e. Britain, USA, France and Italy. George Loewe represented Britain, George Clemenceau represented France, Woodrow Wilson represented USA, and Prime Minister Orlando represented Italy. In May 1919 the treaties were ready, but the most outstanding was the Versailles Peace Treaty, which was signed with Germany, but others included St. Germany, which was signed with Austria-Hungary, Neuilly, which was signed with Bulgaria, Trinum, which was signed with Hungary, and Sevres, which was signed with Turkey. The Treaty of St. Germain with Austria of 1919. This was signed between Austria-Hungary and the victorious powers, i.e. Britain, France, USA and Italy. Its terms included 1. It separated Austria from Hungary and confirmed that Austria was no longer a leading power in the Union. European history Europe after World War I of 1914-1918. 2. 5. Her army was restricted to only 30,000 men. 6. She was forbidden to ever unite with Germany. 7. Austria suffered severe economic problems after the wars. Much of its industries went to Czechoslovakia. The Treaty of Neuilly of November 1919 with Bulgaria. This treaty dealt with Bulgaria. Bulgaria had played a relatively smaller part in the war compared to other nations, and this is why she was treated less harshly. Its terms included 1. She lost lands to Greece, Romania and Yugoslavia and its access to the Mediterranean. 2. She was to limit her armed forces to only 20,000 soldiers. 3. Had to pay a war indemnity fine of £100 million. Treaty of Trinum with Hungary of 1920. This dealt with Hungary and was signed on June/18/1920. Like the Treaty of St. Germain, the Treaty of Trinum involved the transfer of territories. Its terms included 1. The territory of Transylvania was transferred to the state of Romania. 2. Slovakia and Lithuania were transferred to Czechoslovakia. 3. Slovenia and part of Croatia under Hungary was added to Yugoslavia. The Treaty of Sevres with 1920. This was the last of the treaties to be arranged by the victorious powers. It dealt with Turkey and was signed in August 1920. Its terms included 1. Turkey lost the territory of Smyrna to Greece. 2. Syria was declared a mandate territory of France. 3. She was also to lose the straits running directly into the Black Sea. Unlike the other treaties, Sevres was not a successful treaty. The Turks were outraged. European history Europe after World War I of 1914-1918. 3. The treaty by force when they forced the Greek out of Smyrna. By the terms of the Treaty of Lausanne of 1923, Smyrna was returned to Turkey. It should be noted that there is a difference between the Versailles Peace Treaty of 1919 and the Paris Peace Conference of 1919. The Paris Peace Conference of 1919 was the major conference held in Paris by the representatives of the victorious nations after World War I. The Versailles Peace Treaty of 1919, on the other hand, was one of the 5 treaties signed in the Paris Peace Conference Versailles Peace Settlement of 1919, and it was prepared by the Allies for Germany to sign alone, although its final contents included some aspects of the other treaties signed with the rest of the defeated powers, i.e. Austria, Hungary, Bulgaria and Turkey. The Treaty of Versailles of 1919, the Versailles Peace Treaty of 1919. This was signed on 28th/June/1919 in the Hall of Mirrors of Versailles between Germany and the victor powers, i.e. USA, Britain, Italy and France. This treaty had about 404 articles which were given to Germany to sign, and it was signed on the anniversary of the murder of Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophie. 28th June. NB. The Versailles Peace Settlement or Paris Peace Treaty of 1919 was a combination of various treaties, i.e. St. Germain, Versailles Peace Treaty, Tryon and Sevres and Neuilly. The Paris Peace Conference/Versailles Peace Settlement of 1919-1920 was based on 14 points which were raised by the American President Woodrow Wilson, and open covenants were to be encouraged. 1. Secret treaties were to be abolished and open covenants were to be encouraged. 2. All international water bodies were to be free for navigation for all nations, i.e. Atlantic Ocean, Red Sea, Black Sea, Mediterranean Sea. 3. There was to be a ban/reduction on military arms and ammunitions, i.e. disarmament of all nations. 4. Economic barriers were to be removed, especially those affecting the free trade. European history, Europe after World War I of 1914-1918. 4. 10. Germany was to leave all Germany territory as Lebanese. 11. Italy was to receive her share of territories that were promised to her by the victors before she joined them in the First World War. 12. An independent state of Austria was to be recognized, and that Austria and Germany were never to unite again. 13. To ensure the independence of all subject races at the Ottoman Empire. 14. All prisoners were to set free. N.B. George Clemenceau, the Prime Minister of France, who was the chairman in the Paris Peace Conference/Versailles Peace Settlement of 1919-1920, dismissed the 14 points of Woodrow Wilson, and he said, God gave us 10 commandments and we broke them, and Woodrow Wilson has given us 14. Let wait and see. The aims and objectives terms of Paris Peace Conference/Versailles Peace Settlement of 1919. 1. To avoid any future war in Europe and maintain peace in the world at large. 2. To set up an international organization to help in solving problems of the time. 3. To create national states out of the major European empires, i.e. German Empire, Ottoman Empire and Austrian Empire. 4. The peacemakers during the Paris Peace Conference wished that individual races in Europe determine their own future and decide to which states or country they should belong. 5. The peacemakers, especially France, wanted to weaken Germany and prevent her from resurrecting her military might, i.e. France insisted that Germany should be weakened for good. 6. To disarm both the victors and vanquished/defeated powers. 7. To find strategies of preserving the territorial integrity of countries and independence among European countries. 8. To reorganize/redraw the European map and restore the balance of power. European history, Europe after World War I of 1914-1918. 1. The peacemakers of the Paris Peace Conference/Versailles Peace Settlement of 1919 faced the problem of language, i.e. it was not easy to get a single language which was to be used in a conference during discussions, and this created the problem of interpretation and inaccuracy of reporting, especially by the journalists. 2. There was the problem of reconciling the secret treaties which was signed before and after World War I, and here Woodrow Wilson had suggested that only open treaties should be signed, but the Allied or victor powers were not happy with it, as this was to favour Germany. 3. There was a problem of public opinion, most especially in countries like France, i.e. the people in such countries were chanting slogans like Germany must pay and Heil der Kaiser. This gave the delegates peacemakers at the Paris Peace Conference, i.e. Woodrow Wilson, George Lyell, George Clemenceau, Orlando, a very serious problem and difficult time of regarding whether to consider the people's public opinion or that of Germany. 4. There was a problem of humanitarianism, i.e. after the war, many people were displaced and were starving, and this was mostly felt in the Central and Eastern Europe. Therefore, the peacemakers were faced with the problem of how to help such people on humanitarian ground, e.g. food, clothes, clean water, shelter, drugs, etc. 5. The Paris peacemakers also had disagreements on many issues, most especially regarding the punishment of Germany, i.e. George Clemenceau of France wanted Germany to be heavily punished, yet Woodrow Wilson, the USA president, wanted Germany to get a fair punishment, and this brought disagreement among the peacemakers and became a serious problem during the Paris Peace Conference of 1919. 6. There was also selfishness at the Paris Peace Conference, i.e. each statesman/representative wanted to exploit any given opportunity during the conference to satisfy the interests of his own country, and this particularly applied to Britain. European history, Europe after World War I of 1914-1918. 6. In France, hence becoming a serious problem during the Paris Peace Conference of 1919. 7. There was a problem of George Clemenceau, i.e. the conference faced a problem of chairmanship, i.e. George Clemenceau was nicknamed the Tiger because of his toughness during the conference, most especially against Germany. He even reminded Woodrow Wilson of USA, who wanted fair punishment to Germany, that the war had not been fought on American soil but in Europe. Hence, the chairmanship of George Clemenceau brought misunderstanding between USA and France that presented a very big problem at the Paris Peace Conference of the 1919. 8. The time factor was also a serious problem to the peacemakers at the Paris Peace Conference of 1919, i.e. the task they faced was huge, but they had a very short time to deal with the defeated powers and wanted the outcome to be in the interest of their individual countries. They didn't have enough time to remain in the conference and identify the problems facing European countries at the time, hence the outcome of the conference was totally half-baked, and this was a very serious problem during the Paris Peace Conference Versailles Peace Settlement of 1919. 9. There was also a problem of racial complication, most especially in Central Europe, i.e. they had a task of redrawing the map of Europe, but they didn't have enough information regarding the different states and races of Europe, i.e. Germany lost her control over Poland, which had 1 million German nationals, Yugoslavia, which had 2 million German nationals, etc., and this made Adolf Hitler to attack these countries that ended up causing World War II in 193,945. Strength of the Versailles Peace Settlement/Paris Peace. Treaty of 1919-1920. The settlement started on 18th/Jan/1919 and ended on 21st/Jan/1920, and it took 5 months of serious bargaining, and out of this a number of treaties that dealt with the defeated or vanquished powers were realized. At the conference, the defeated powers had specific treaties that signed, i.e. the Versailles Peace Treaty specifically for Germany, Treaty of Saint-Germain for Austria, Treaty of Trianon for Hungary, and Treaty of Sèvres for Turkey. European history Europe after World War I of 1914-1918. 7. The summation of these treaties was what was concluded in Versailles Peace Settlement or the Paris Peace Treaty of 1919. The following are the strong points of the Versailles Peace Settlement/Paris Peace Treaty of 1919. 1. The Versailles Peace Settlement of 1919 laid foundation for the establishment of the League of Nations as an instrument of peace. This was one of the most important points of Woodrow Wilson's 14 points. He had realized that the differences and conflicts among the powers had driven them into a catastrophe. W1, partly because they failed to solve their issues through roundtable discussions. This caused the breakdown in European diplomacy, and therefore the LOM was created in 1920 out of the Versailles Peace Settlement of 1919 as a major venue through which grievances would be channeled such that diplomacy can prevail in this light to peace between 1920-1939, 19 years hence a big achievement of VPS of 1919. 2. The Versailles Peace Settlement/Paris Peace Treaty of 1919 granted independence to small states and nationalities. It should be remembered that there existed 4 old empires in Europe, i.e. Ottoman Empire, Germany Empire, Russian Empire, and the Austria-Hungary Empire. These had been a source of trouble for Europe, but peacemakers at Versailles destroyed them, and therefore giving opportunity to not only the establishment of new states, but also give such states self-determination and independence. E.g. Hungary was separated from Austria to become an independent state. Bohemia and Slovakia were united to create a new state of Czechoslovakia. Yugoslavia was also created from the Empire of Russia. Poland, Finland, Lithuania, and Latvia were also declared independent from the Ottoman Empire. Iraq, Iran, Jordan, Palestine were also declared independent, hence a big achievement registered by VPS of 1919. 3. The Versailles Peace Settlement of 1919 ensured that Alsace and Lorraine were given back to France. It should be noted that the 2 provinces had been taken away by Germany after the France-Prussian War of 1870-71. Their provinces were rich in iron and coal respectively, and were given to Germany by the Frankfurt Treaty of 1871. However, the delegates at the Versailles Peace Conference respected Woodrow Wilson's idea of returning the 2 provinces to France in order to diffuse the enmity between France and Germany that had European history Europe after World War I of 1914-1918. 8. Being under Germany dominance, hence a big achievement registered by UPS of 1919. 4. The Versailles Peace Settlement of 1919 also ended W1, which broke out in 1914, Britain, France, and USA, etc., and officially ended in 1918. The victor powers decided to meet the vanquished/defeated powers, i.e. Germany, Austria, Turkey, etc., at Versailles in Paris City, and mapped out a way of bringing about relative peace. They agreed to address the challenges of Europe, and it was at Versailles that Germany was forced to denounce war and accept the war guilt clause of the Versailles Treaty of 1919. It was also in this peace settlement that the treaties of Trianon, Saint-Germain, Sèvres, and Neuilly were signed by the defeated powers, i.e. Bulgaria, Austria, Turkey, Germany, etc. This ushered in relative peace and unity until 1939, when yet another war broke out, hence a big achievement registered by the Versailles Peace Settlement of 1919 in bringing to it an end of W1. 5. The Versailles Peace Settlement of 1919 attempted to reward Italy for her participation on the side of the Allies during the war. It should be recalled that, although Italy was a member of Triple Alliance of Bismarck, but she joined the Allies' Triple Entente to fight against the Central Powers with a promise that she will be given territory as a reward at the end of the war. Indeed, at Versailles Peace Conference, she given some territories, e.g. she got the cities of Trice, Trial, Paula, which containing about 250,000 Germans. She was also given Istra, containing about 40,000 Slavs. In this way, the Versailles Peace Settlement of 1919 recognized the good job done by Italy in fighting alongside the victors' powers Triple Entente, i.e. Britain, France, and USA, etc. 6. The Versailles Peace Settlement of 1919 also ensured that people in the colonies, European history Europe after World War I of 1914-1918. 9. 7. The Versailles Peace Settlement of 1919 maintained the neutrality of Belgium, which had been violated by Germany on the eve of the outbreak of W1. Germany directed her troops through Belgium in trying to attack France, which signified that Belgian neutrality and independence had been violated, which was contrary to the terms of 1839 London Agreement that had granted it. It should be noted that from Woodrow Wilson's 14 points, the settlements called for complete evacuation of German troops from Belgium. On top of her neutrality, she was also given some territories such as Ypres and Normandy. Therefore the VP S re-emphasized that Belgium was neutral and her integrity and boundaries must be respected, hence a big achievement made by VPS of 1919. 8. The Versailles Peace Settlement of 1919 also ensured that the people of Austria-Hungary were given the opportunity of independent development. The conference realized that the union between Germany and Austria-Hungary had started the alliance system, which was one of the causes of W1. However, at Versailles Peace Conference, the victor powers, i.e. Britain, France, USA, and Italy, agreed that Austria and Hungary must be separated as two independent states. Another union with Germany must never be accepted. Therefore, the Versailles Peace Settlement of 1919 disintegrated the dual monarchy of Austro-Hungary and also ensured reoccurrence of a union for whatever reason between Austria and Germany can never take places as a way of maintaining peace in Europe. 9. The Versailles Peace Settlement of 1919 also granted freedom of navigation on all international water bodies, i.e. it declared free navigation on all international water bodies except those that were territorial. It should be recalled for a long period of time, such water bodies were a source of economic conflicts, i.e. Britain had monopolized continental waters, e.g. Mediterranean Sea, Adriatic Sea, Baltic Sea, etc. Her claim of control over those water bodies stretched as far back as 1830s. Therefore, the Versailles Settlement of 1919 opened all these water bodies to all European nations at all time. This also eased movement of people on Europe continent, increased the volume of trade and promoted cooperation among European countries, hence a big achievement. Then, the Versailles Peace Settlement of 1919 also agreed on the establishment of an independent country of Poland. Throughout history, Poland had been European history, Europe after World War I of 1914-1918. 10. Under Russian foreign control, even when Napoleon established the Grand Duchy of Warsaw, Poland still remained under the control of France. The Vienna Peace Settlement of 1814-15 returned it after the defeat of Napoleon I to Russia. The Poles-Polish attempted to revolt in 1830, 1846 and 1863 to get their independence, but in vain. However, the delegates of Versailles Peace Conference created a new state of Poland in relation to Woodrow Wilson's 14 points, in which she was given access to the Baltic Sea, she was given Germany territories of Posen and Port of Danzig, which was an outlet to the sea, more territory from Eastern Prussia was added on Poland and came to be known as the Polish Corridor, hence a big achievement registered by VPS of 1919. 11. The Versailles Peace Settlement of 1919 also restored the principle of diplomacy and mediation on continental Europe, which had collapsed following the collapse of the Concert of Europe by 1830. It should be recalled that the Vienna Peace Settlement of 1814-15 was the last of such arrangement after the defeat of Napoleon in 1815, where the powers settled the continental problems through collective responsibility. Although such arrangement had given birth to the Congress system again by 1830, the system of concertism had crumbled/collapsed. The system, especially during the Bismarckian era, the efforts were fruitless. Therefore, the Versailles Peace Settlement of 1919 brought about the meaningful European diplomacy where the powers of Europe discussed, mediated and came up with conclusive actions on most of the continental problems. Therefore, the Versailles Peace Settlement of 1919 restored the principle of diplomacy in round-table discussions in Europe, hence a big achievement. 12. The Versailles Peace Settlement of 1919 also managed to disarm Germany and her allies, i.e. Austria, Turkey, etc. in a bid to maintain peace in Europe. The war had partly occurred because of the arms race that was started by Germany. Therefore, to ensure that such catastrophe never occurs, the victor powers issued the disarmament clause in which Germany's army was reduced to only 100,000 soldiers. The victor powers, i.e. Britain, France, USA and Italy, ensured that forceful military conscription that characterized Germany was banned. It stopped Germany from manufacturing heavy war materials such as submarines, tanks, battleships, etc. Her naval force was reduced only to be battleships of second-class grade. All her aircraft and submarines were destroyed. Also her European history, Europe after World War I of 1914-1918. 11 weakened them to the extent that they were unable to plan another war for at least a period of 20 years, 1919-1939. The weaknesses of the Versailles Peace Settlement of 1919. But the Versailles Peace Settlement of 1919 attempted to bring lasting peace on Europe. However, the methods that the peacemakers used were somehow unrealistic. The Versailles Peace Settlement had several weaknesses and therefore unrealistic as seen below. 1. The organization of the conference was not properly done because decision-making process was dominated by the three big powers, e.g. France under George Clemenceau, Britain under George Lloyd, and USA under Woodrow Wilson. The defeated parties were only to remain observers. Moreover, the treaties that were signed for the vanquished states, such as the Versailles, Sevres, Trianon, Neuilly, etc., were only presented to them for signatures, and any objection were to be put in writing officially. Therefore, the conference and settlement, the defeated parties only waited for the verdict, i.e. it was a diktat. Therefore, the defeated countries, i.e. Germany, felt unhappy with the outcomes of the settlement and even later resisted it. 2. The venue where the Versailles Peace Settlement of 1919 was signed also left a lot to be desired. It should be remembered that the conference and settlement were held in the French capital Paris and particularly at Versailles in the Hall of Mirrors. The settlement should have been signed on a neutral ground that would make the defeated powers, including Germany, comfortable, but the fact that the victor powers agreed to sign the conference in France, the very country that was humiliated by Germany in 1871, i.e. the same venue where Germany Empire was proclaimed following the defeat of France in Franco-Prussian War of 1870-71. The French mood right from 1871 was that of revenge, i.e. she had lost Alsace and Lorraine, her mineralized provinces, etc. Hence France was determined to humiliate Germany as they were humiliated in the France-Prussian War of 1871. 3. The chairmanship of the conference and the settlement also raised eyebrows. It should be recalled that at the Versailles Peace Conference, the chairmanship of Georges Clemenceau, the French premier, who was biased from the start. This was because Clemenceau had bitter memories of the defeat of France in 1871, and in 1914 they were defeated again in the hands of the Germans. Therefore the chairman hated the Germans so much that during the Paris Peace, European history, Europe after World War I of 1914-1918. 12. The decision-making in favor of France. Something that ended up annoying Germany, hence the settlement was unable to bring about lasting peace. 4. Although the Versailles Peace Settlement of 1919 established new states that were independent, however these states were too weak to defend themselves against European aggressors, e.g. at the Versailles Peace Settlement of 1919. Poland was created after removing some territory from Germany. It also created Czechoslovakia and Yugoslavia, but these states were too weak that Germany invaded them one after the other because they had German population, which later sparked off the W11 in 1939. E.g. Adolf Hitler attacked Czechoslovakia in 1938, Austria in 1938, and Poland in 1939 because they were weak. Therefore the Versailles Peace Settlement of 1919 failed to create total peace in Europe because of these weak states it created that couldn't defend themselves. 5. The Versailles Peace Settlement of 1919 was unfair because it left out Russia, which was not invited simply because of her communist inclination. In 1917, the Bolsheviks had taken over power in Russia after a successful socialist revolution which kept Russia far away from the Allies who were capitalists. It should also be remembered that Russia had fought with the Triple Entente during the First World War, in which she had lost a number of troops and civilians. She had also been the biggest loser in terms of territory following the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, but the victor powers looked at Russia with suspicion and mistrust to the extent that they didn't invite her in the Versailles Conference of 1919, which left a lot to be desired. 6. The Versailles Peace Settlement of 1919 also was unrealistic because it ignored and abused the spirit of German nationalism from the Versailles Peace Settlement, out of which the Versailles Treaty of 1919 was derived. The people of Germany were unfairly treated because they were unfairly subjected to foreign control, yet they had struggled so much for their unity following the blood and iron policy of Bismarck. Many Germany-speaking people, Germany nationals across the continent, were partitioned and handed over to countries such as 2.5 in Czechoslovakia, 12 in Yugoslavia, 3 to Austria, and 1 to Poland. This annoyed Germany under Adolf Hitler, and he decided to attack all these countries in order to liberate fellow Germans from such countries that finally led to the outbreak of W11 in 1939. 7. The foundation of the Versailles Peace Settlement of 1919 lacked universal legality. Many of the provisions of the Versailles Peace Settlement of 1919 were based on Woodrow Wilson's 14 points, which therefore meant that its outcomes were questionable. It was as a result of Woodrow Wilson's personal analysis and how peace would prevail after the war, and the settlement was not born out of European history, Europe after World War I of 1914-1918. 13. Rebuke the point that God gave us 10 commandments and we broke them, but Woodrow Wilson has given us 14. Let's wait and see. This showed that Wilson had just drafted his own ideas, hence the VPS had loopholes, and that's why it was rejected by Germany, Japan, and Italy, and therefore it couldn't bring lasting peace. 8. The Versailles Peace Settlement of 1919 was unfair because it led to loss of territories by some countries together with their population. Cases in point: Austria lost some territories and was reduced to a small state, i.e. it lost Bosnia and Herzegovina that she had annexed in 1908. Turkey also lost the territory of Thrace to Greece. Germany lost Tanganyika to Britain, Cameroon and Tonga to France, etc. This undermined the territorial integrity of these countries, and they weren't even consulted when such adjustments were made. This loss of territories by some states later led to outbreak of W11 in 1939, i.e. Germany's invasion of Poland on 1st/Sept/1939. This sparked off the outbreak of W11 in 1939. 9. The Versailles Peace Settlement of 1919 also poorly rewarded some of the countries that fought alongside the victors, especially Italy. It's true that the settlement attempted to reward Italy when she received the territories of Trial Istria. To the peacemakers this was just compensation, but to the Italians the Versailles peacemakers only gave them peanuts which were not commensurate to the energy/force they put in while fighting against the Central Powers. Although she had been promised a lot of territories by the Allies, i.e. Britain, France, etc. before she joined the war. The Versailles Peace Settlement of 1919 therefore did not properly reward Italy, which left the Italians dissatisfied, and it was for this reason why Mussolini attacked Ethiopia, Albania and Greece in order to compensate Italy, and even later on Mussolini joined Adolf Hitler and Hirohito formed the Berlin-Rome-Tokyo alliance that caused W11 in 1939. Then, the Versailles Peace Settlement of 1919 also was signed in revengeful mood of the victor powers, which was in itself unfair. It should be noted that right from the start, all the deliberations at the conference and its outcomes were inclined to revenge on Germany. This was seen in the comments that were made when Woodrow Wilson advised on treating Germany fairly. Other statesmen at Versailles Peace Conference insisted on the slogan "Hang the Kaiser" and make Germany pay it. This was perceived as the highest form of injustice done to the Germans, and that's why they rejected the outcomes of the settlement, because the spirit in which it was done was that of revenge, i.e. Hitler told the Germans that Germany was stabbed in the back by Versailles peacemakers. European history. Europe after World War I of 1914-1918. 14 all countries were advised to disarm, including the victors, i.e. Britain, France, etc. to a level of only domestic safety. However, the delegates didn't have the efforts to disarm the Allies, especially Britain, USA and France, and only insisted on disarming the vanquished/defeated powers. Cases in point: Germany only remained with 100,000 troops, 6 battleships of second-class grade. Her military capacity was further reduced when she was instructed not to produce submarines, aircrafts, tanks, etc. Austria's armed forces were also reduced to about 30,000. Bulgaria to 20,000 men. This was unfair disarmament program to the defeated powers, and even forced Hitler rearm Germany, leading revival of arms race that caused W11 in 1939. 12. The Versailles Peace Settlement of 1919 was also unfair, where it solely held Germany responsible for the outbreak of W1 in 1914. It wasn't logical to blame Germany alone for causing W1 in 1914, yet all powers of Europe eventually involved themselves, e.g. although Germany began the arms race, even other countries such as Britain, France, USA, etc. took part in the manufacture of deadly weapons, involved themselves in hostilities and rivalries with members of antagonistic alliances, etc., which made them active participants in this war. Therefore, the delegates put the war on Germany alone, and exonerating themselves was too unfair to the vanquished powers. It's no wonder the settlement failed to bring about lasting peace in Europe. 13. The Versailles Peace Settlement of 1919 was also unrealistic because of the disagreements that characterized the conference. It should be noted that the deliberations at Versailles were stormy because of the selfish interests that each of the statesmen had. They were dominated by conflicting interests over the vanquished states, e.g. George Clemenceau wanted to permanently cripple Germany to prevent her from ever rising again. Ally George was inclined to taking all Germany's colonial possessions to strengthen the British overseas empire. Holland of Italy wanted to get Italy as many territories as possible as promised by the Allies, while Woodrow Wilson just wanted peace and fair treatment for the defeated powers, promote international trade and reconciliation. Therefore, disagreements and selfish interests from the victor powers led to encounter arguments which made the vanquished powers doubtful about the credibility of the conference and settlement in general. 14. The Versailles Peace Settlement of 1919 also contributed to the rise of European history. Europe after World War I of 1914-1918. 15 to sign the terms of the settlement, and therefore they established fascist regimes which began to terrorize the world in response to the unfair terms of the settlement. Such dictators overthrew the liberal government, e.g. Mussolini in 1922, overthrew Victor Emmanuel 111, Adolf Hitler in 1934 replaced the Weimar Republic and established the Nazi dictatorship. Hirohito also took over Japan, and these dictators led to the outbreak of W11 in 1939, and this was a result of the VPS of 1919. 15. The timing of the conference was also wrong. It was held when the mood of hatred and revenge was still high in most European countries, e.g. in both Britain and French people were chanting slogans like "Germany must pay" and "Hang the Kaiser." Therefore, under such circumstances, it was quite hard for the peacemakers at the Paris Peace Conference to come out with moderate peace terms. Hence, this ended up annoying Germany, which made the treaty become weak since it was challenged by the defeated powers. 16. The defeated/vanquished powers were not allowed to present their views and defend themselves. Therefore, the vanquished powers, i.e. Germany, Austria, Bulgaria, etc., were not happy with the Versailles peacemakers since the terms were just dictated and the treaty became unfair, and vanquished powers reacted by rejecting it, i.e. Germany under Hitler, which partly caused W11 in 1939. 17. The Versailles Peace Settlement of 1919 also put in place a weak organization in the name of the LON League of Nations that was informed in 1920 but lacked means to enforce and implement the peace terms agreed upon in the conference, i.e. the LON was a toothless lion that couldn't bite, and lacked the military strength to protect the terms of the Paris Peace Treaty. 1919 hence a sign of failure. Questions. 1. Examine the achievements and weakness of the Versailles Peace Settlement of 1919. 2. Examine the strength and weakness of the Versailles Peace Settlement of 1919. 3. Examine the achievements and failures of the Paris Peace Treaty of 1919. The Versailles Peace Treaty of 1919. The Versailles Peace Treaty was signed on 28/June/1919 in the Hall of Mirrors at European History Europe after World War I of 1914-1918. 16 complete in 1871. This treaty had about 404 articles which were given to Germany to sign, and it was signed on the anniversary of the murder of Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophie 28th June. The representative of the victor powers were George L. Iod of Britain, George Clemenceau of France, Woodrow Wilson of USA, and Orlando of Italy, and Germany was represented by the Weimar Republic. The Germany representatives didn't take part in the discussion, but were presented with the treaty for signing, hence it was a diktat. The treaty contained articles that were detailed on how Germany was to be treated, following the fact that she was the biggest among those accused of causing W1 in 1914. The verdict was indeed harsh for Germany, and it greatly displeased the Germans, something that made Hitler reject it and partly caused the outbreak of WW2 in 1939. The aims and objectives of the Versailles Peace Treaty of 1919. 1. To reorganize Europe with the purpose of maintaining world peace and security. 2. To redraw the map of Europe and restore balance of power, and this was because Germany had changed the European map and the balance power. 3. To redraw strategies that would preserve the territorial integrity and independence of small states. 4. To reconcile the differences between Germany and the victor powers after W1. 5. To free different races that were being occupied and dominated by European powers like Germany and her allies. 6. To disarm both the defeated and the victor powers and avoid the arms race and militarism on the European continent. 7. The victor powers like British and France wanted to destroy Germany and her allies in order to safeguard themselves against future German aggression. The terms of the Versailles Peace Treaty of 1919. 1. The Territorial Clause. Germany was to lose most of her territories in Europe and Africa, i.e. Alsace and Lorraine, to France, Europe and Normandy to Belgium, Posen to Poland, and Saarland province and Danzig were put under the LON, and these were rich in minerals like iron, coal, etc., and profits from the two provinces were to go to France. Germany also lost the Rhineland region, which was demilitarized. European History Europe after World War I of 1914-1918. 17. 2. Related to the above was the demilitarization clause, i.e. Germany was told to demilitarize the Rhine area. This meant that the strip of land in western Germany between River Rhine and the French border was to be evacuated by Germany troops. It should be recalled that after the Franco-Prussian War of 1870-1871, Germany had stationed her troops in this zone in preparation for France's War of Revenge. By the terms of the Versailles Peace Treaty, Germany was even stopped from building military fortifications in the Rhine area/region. In essence, the demilitarization clause of the treaty gave France the chance to militarize the Rhine area. 3. The Disarmament Clause. Following this clause, Germany was to be reduced militarily to a tune only necessary for home protection. She was to be kept away from ever threatening peace again. In this clause, Germany was stopped from manufacturing any war material, e.g. submarines, tanks, battleships, warplanes, etc. Her naval capacity was only reduced to 1,500 naval forces and 6 battleships of second-grade class. The size of the Germany's army was to be restricted to 100,000 troops instead of 4 million she had before W1. This was meant to reduce Germany's military strength. 4. The War Guilty Clause of the Versailles Peace Treaty of 1919 put the entire blame on Germany for causing W1 in 1914. This was the most severe part of the treaty, which was embedded in Article 231. This clause placed the sole blame of the war on Germany's shoulders. The article particularly stated the Allied government affirms that Germany accepts the responsibility for causing the war and the damages to the Allied powers as a result of the war imposed on them by the aggression of Germany and her allies. 5. The War Indemnity/Reparation Clause. As a result of Germany's war guilt, she was required to pay war reparations to the victor powers. The purpose of this money was to compensate the enormous cost of the war. The war reparations were worked out by a special reparation committee or commission, and therefore fixed the reparations sum at £6.5 billion to be paid in installments. She was to also deliver to the Allies part of these some form of ships which were to be built for them for 5 years, chemicals, cattle, coal, etc. 6. Germany was to return all the confiscated property from France. The delegates of Versailles agreed that Germany was to return whatever she took from France after the Franco-Prussian War of 1870-71. The humiliation of France had seen her losing her artwork/pieces, trophies, and her flag that Germany took. All these were to be returned to France with no objection. 7. Germany was to accept and respect the independence of small states that were created, more especially Yugoslavia, Czechoslovakia, Poland. The Germany European History Europe after World War I of 1914-1918. 18. 8. The LON League of Nations was to be formed to maintain international peace and security. Therefore, it was because of the Versailles Peace Treaty of 1919 that the European continent was to have an international organization that was to preserve world peace and stability. The weaknesses of the Versailles Peace Treaty of 1919. 1. The Versailles Peace Treaty of 1919 was just imposed on Germany since she did not take part in the discussions at Versailles. The delegates at Versailles didn't give chance to Germany to deliberate any issues in the treaty. The treaty was only presented to Germany given 3 days to respond, and therefore Germany was forced to accept the unjust treaty, which was an indicator that the treaty just dictated, i.e. it was a diktat and imposed on Germany and was not negotiable. To worsen matters, the big powers threatened to renew war on Germany if she had failed to sign, hence rendering the treaty unfair to Germany, and that's why Adolf Hitler of Germany rejected it. 2. The Versailles Peace Treaty of 1919 unfairly executed the disarmament program on Germany. The aims of the peacemakers of the Versailles Peace Settlement of 1919 were to disarm all nations, including the victors. However, in executing the disarmament clause, Germany was unfairly disarmed. The Germany troops were reduced from 4 million to only 100,000 soldiers, restricted in producing submarines, tanks, aircraft, etc., which militarily weakened Germany and made her vulnerable to any external attack. The victors, on the other hand, continued manufacturing such dangerous weapons. This made Adolf Hitler to rearm Germany, that led to a revival of arms race that caused WL11 in 1939. 3. The Versailles Peace Treaty of 1919 had another weakness when it solely held Germany responsible for the outbreak of W1 under the War Guilty Clause. This put Germany in position 1 according to the treaty. It should, however, be recalled that although Germany was provocative to other countries before 1914, she did not fight alone, but the victor powers put the whole blame on her, while Germany had involved herself in arms race. Britain and France quickly followed. Germany participated in acquisition of colonies, so were Britain and France. She started the alliance system, but also Britain, France and Russia made a counter-alliance triple entente. Therefore, putting the whole blame on Germany for causing this war and exonerating themselves was very unfair to Germany, and it's not surprising Adolf Hitler rejected it when he became the leader of Germany in 1934. European history. Europe after World War I of 1914-1918. 4. The Versailles Peace Treaty of 1919 imposed a heavy war indemnity on Germany, which was unrealistically high, i.e. the war reparation clause dictated £6.5 billion to Germany to pay for next 30 years of victor powers, which was too high for any country to pay, yet Germany ravaged by the W1. On top of that, even the economically potential areas which would enable Germany in paying the war indemnity, especially the Saltland coal region, even when the efforts were made by classical economists such as Keynes in advising the victors in reducing the war indemnity to about 2 million fell on deaf ears. And when Hitler rose to power in Germany, he refused to clear the war indemnity that partly caused WL11 in 1939. 5. The Versailles Peace Treaty of 1919 was also unfair because it abused and violated the spirit of German nationalism. Following the territorial adjustment clause of the treaty, many Germans were denied a right of self-determination when the treaty made them become foreigners in the newly created independent states, i.e. Czechoslovakia 2 million German, Yugoslavia 2.5 and Austria 3 Poland 1 German nationals. To Germany, this was unfair because this undermined German nationalism and they faced discrimination, oppression, and repression in such states, something that forced Adolf Hitler to attack such states that ended up causing WL11 in 1939, hence a sign of failure by Versailles Peace Treaty of 1919. 6. The Versailles Peace Treaty of 1919 denied Germany her colonial possessions, yet the victors enjoyed their far distant colonies, i.e. Germany was unfairly treated by the decolonization clause of the treaty, i.e. she lost her colonies in Africa and Asia, which were to be treated as mandate states, and to worsen matters, the LON handed over these colonies to Britain and France, e.g. Cameroon and Togo to France and Tanganyika to Britain, then maybe to South Africa. Therefore, the loss of such territories made the treaty unfair to Germany because it were the enemies of Germany, i.e. France and Britain, that continued exploiting them, i.e. they became sources of raw materials to their industries and markets for the manufactured goods, and it's not surprising that when Hitler rose to power in Germany, he rejected the treaty. 7. The Versailles Peace Treaty of 1919 instructed Germany to demilitarize the Rhine region/area, which also showed signs of unfairness. The zone was the border between France and Germany, but the Germans had militarized the area after the Franco-Prussian War of 1870-71, i.e. from 1871-1919, and made it the main defense against any French attack in her possible war of revenge against Germany. The treaty instructed Germany to demilitarize the area, i.e. remove all her troops and military fortifications she had built along this area, which left European history. Europe after World War I of 1914-1918. 20 rose to power, he remilitarized the Rhine region that partly led to the outbreak of WL11 in 1939. 8. Besides the above, the timing of the signing of the treaty was also unfair and left many questions unanswered, i.e. the treaty was signed on 28/June/1919, a date that created mixed feelings among many Germans. It was the 5th anniversary of the Sarajevo double murder. France Archduke Ferdinand and his wife Sophie, who were assassinated on 28/June/1914. One wonders why the treaty was signed on the same day that coincided with the Sarajevo incident, which clearly showed that the punishments given to Germany were highly connected to the Sarajevo incident, which was unfair for holding Germany responsible for the action she never did. 9. Another weakness of the Versailles Peace Treaty of 1919 was that it did not bring Kaiser William XI and other criminals to book, yet they partly caused the war. The blame for the war was put on Germany as a country, but the activities of Kaiser as an individual were not considered, yet he was not a peace lover, he was a warmonger. It was him who refused Britain's gesture for friendship. He also began the arms race, designed the program in 1899 of the Berlin-Baghdad railway line, sent congratulatory telegram to Paul Kruger upon defeating Britain in 1894, James Reid, etc. But by 1919 Kaiser had abdicated the throne and fled to Holland. Even the Dutch government refused to hand over this criminal, which later became the basis for other aggressors like Hitler and Mussolini to behave the same way, something that partly caused WL11 in 1939. 10. The treaty was also weak simply because the decision-making was dominated by mainly 3 countries, i.e. Britain, France, and to a smaller extent USA, and the resolutions tended to favour Britain and France at the expense of custody to Saar region, which had coal and other minerals like iron which formerly belonged to Germany. France and Britain gained mandatory colonies in Africa like Tanganyika for Britain, Togo and Cameroon to France that formerly belonged to Germany, etc. Therefore the Versailles Peace Treaty of 1919 was unfair to Germany, and this partly forced Hitler to attack Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, Poland in compensation for the loss of her colonial territories during the treaty that partly caused WL11 in 1939. 11. The Versailles Peace Treaty of 1919 created weak states which it couldn't protect and defend, something that caused future trouble that partly led to the outbreak of WL11 of 1939-45. These included Yugoslavia, Czechoslovakia, Poland, etc., where were very weak and unable to defend themselves against any European history. Europe after World War I of 1914-1918. 21. 12. The Versailles Peace Treaty of 1919 partly contributed to the occurrence of economic depression of 1929-35. This was mainly because of its poor economic terms that the treaty had imposed on Germany, i.e. Germany was heavily punished by imposing on her a heavy war indemnity of £6.6 billion. She was not allowed to freely export and import goods, yet Germany was a great trading partner to most European countries. This kind of situation therefore affected free trade on the European continent and laid a ground for the occurrence of the economic depression between 1929-1935, where economic activities came to a standstill in Europe, leading to high unemployment, low incomes, low investment, etc. Hence a sign of weakness of the Versailles Peace Treaty of 1919. 13. The Versailles Peace Treaty of 1919 failed to ensure lasting peace in Europe because it led to the outbreak of WL11 in 1939. The treaty sowed seeds for the outbreak of WL11 because countries like Germany and Italy wanted to change the settlement, which they considered unfair. For example, Germany later invaded Poland and Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, etc., where German nationals that had been included in those countries by the Versailles Peace Treaty of 1919 became foreigners. This was interpreted as an aggression, and the Allied powers, i.e. Britain, France, USA, etc., therefore decided to declare war on Germany in 1939. 14. The Versailles Peace Treaty of 1919 failed to cater for Italy and Japan. It should be noted that Italy and Japan had fought with the Allied powers against Germany up to 1919 when she was defeated. However, according to the Italians, the rewards given to their country by the Versailles Peace Treaty were peanuts. No single Germany colony was given to Italy, yet Britain and France took over Tanganyika and Togo among others respectively. The same was true with Japan. Italy and Japan therefore became very bitter, and therefore they later decided to form an alliance of the Axis powers, i.e. Berlin-Rome-Tokyo Axis, and this revived the alliance system in Europe that eventually caused World War I between 1940-1918. 15. The Versailles Treaty of 1919 led to the rise of dictator/dictatorial regimes in Germany and Italy. In Germany, Adolf Hitler campaigned the Versailles Peace Treaty of 1919, and therefore he received massive support from the Germans, which enabled him to take over power from the Weimar Republic in 1933. In Italy, Benito Mussolini was given support because of his criticism of the unfairness of the Versailles Peace Treaty of 1919 to Italy. This assisted him to European history. Europe after World War I of 1914-1918. 22. The strengths/achievements of the Versailles Peace Treaty of 1919. 1. The Versailles Peace Treaty of 1919 confirmed the creation of a peacemaking body known as the League of Nations in 1920. This is derived from Woodrow Wilson's 13 points arguing European powers to form an international organization that would act as channel for conflict resolution. This was the first of its kind in Europe and the world at large. The LNO managed to maintain peace for at least 20 years until the outbreak of the Second World War in 1939. Therefore, the Versailles Peace Treaty of 1919 restored the principle of diplomacy and round-table discussions, hence a big achievement registered by the Versailles Peace Treaty of 1919. 2. The Versailles Peace Treaty of 1919 ended WE1, and this led to relative peace on the European continent for at least a period of 20 years. 1990-1939. Germany and her allies were told to denounce the war at Versailles Peace Treaty, and Germany in particular was forced to accept defeat. Therefore, terms of the treaty weakened Germany, which greatly led to peace and security in Europe and the world at large, hence a big achievement made by the Versailles Peace Treaty of 1919. 3. The Versailles Peace Treaty of 1919 helped France to get back her lost 2 provinces of Alsace and Lorraine from Germany. It should be recalled that these 2 provinces had been annexed by Germany from France after the Franco-Prussian War of 1870-71, following the terms of the Frankfurt Treaty of 1871 after the Franco-Prussian War. These provinces were rich in iron and coal respectively, and yet they were taken against the will of France. Therefore, the Versailles Peace Treaty of 1919 gave them back to France as a way of bringing back peace and reconciliation between the 2 countries, hence the strength of the treaty. 4. The Versailles Peace Treaty of 1919 managed to disarm Germany and her allies by maintaining relative peace for some time. It should be recalled that Germany had started the arms race, which was quickly adopted by other countries, hence causing W1. However, the Versailles Peace Treaty contained the possibility of another similar war through the disarmament clause, in which Germany was reduced to a capacity of only 100,000 troops. She was refused from conscription, prevented from manufacturing deadly weapons, which greatly weakened her and reduced her militarily. Therefore, the disarmament clause of the Versailles Peace Treaty saved the world from German aggression for a period. European history: Europe after World War I of 1914-1918. 23. 5. The Versailles Peace Treaty of 1919 managed to force Germany to return all the confiscated property to France following the effects of Franco-Prussian War of 1870-1871. The Germans humiliated France in various ways. However, of all those, the greatest humiliation that Germany did was to force France to surrender all the flags as a sign of defeat. On top of the above, she also surrendered her trophies, art pieces that Germany took in 1871. Therefore, the return of these confiscated properties to France was a sign of relief, although most of them had disappeared, but it was a positive gesture from the Versailles Peace Treaty of 1919. 6. The Versailles Peace Treaty of 1919 was also credited for granting Poland access to sea and guarantee her independence. For long, Poland had been under the control of Russia and was a landlocked country. However, following the territorial adjustment clause of the treaty, Poland was granted access to the Baltic Sea. The treaty also gave some Germany territory such as Polish Corridor, East Prussia to Poland. This was made to strengthen the economic position of Poland, which was granted access to the Baltic Sea. Poland remained independent until Adolf Hitler attacked her in 1939. Therefore, the treaty guaranteed the independence of Poland. 7. The Versailles Peace Treaty of 1919 was also credited for disallowing the union between Germany and Austria, which was also embedded in the Treaty of Saint-Germain. It should be noted that such a union had been the cause of the alliance system that destabilized Europe and therefore created 2 hostile camps, i.e. Triple Alliance and Triple Entente. Therefore, in the bid to prevent the reoccurrence of the same, the Versailles Peace Treaty forbade Germany and Austria from ever uniting again, which kept Europe at peace until 1936, when Adolf Hitler attacked Austria and reunited it with Germany, hence a big achievement registered by the Versailles Peace Treaty of 1919. 8. The Versailles Peace Treaty of 1919 confirmed France's dominance of the North African countries of Tunisia, Morocco and Algeria. It should be remembered that Germany had conflicts with France over Morocco, which conflict resulted into the First Morocco Crisis of 1905 and the Second Balkan Crisis of 1911, when the Kaiser sent his warship that landed at the Morocco seaport of Agadir. Although the agreement was signed between the 2 countries, Germany had never fully accepted French occupation of Morocco. Therefore, after the defeat of Germany in W1, the Versailles Peace Treaty of 1919 absolutely confirmed France's control over Morocco and other North African countries, e.g. Tunisia and Algeria, hence a big achievement. 9. The Versailles Peace Treaty of 1919 demilitarized the Rhine area/region in order. European history: Europe after World War I of 1914-1918. 24. Germany to militarize the Rhine. France was able to have a guarantee that Germany would not attack her from the western side of the Rhineland, which in itself was an attempt to maintain peace in Europe, hence a big achievement. The impact of the Versailles Peace Treaty on Germany. The impact of the Versailles Peace Treaty on Germany was largely destructive or negative, and that's why Germany under Adolf Hitler soon rejected the terms of the treaty and pursued rearmament as well as military aggression on Europe, such that by 1939 World War II broke out. Below were the effects impact of the Versailles Peace Treaty of 1919 on Germany. 1. It was dictated and imposed on the German people, i.e. the Germany government. Weimar Republic was forced to sign and accept the treaty, and this made the Germany government, Weimar Republic, become very unpopular for accepting such a harsh and unfair treaty, and it's not surprising that the Weimar Republic was later replaced by Nazi government under Adolf Hitler in 1933-1945. 2. The heavy war indemnity which was imposed on Germany, i.e. £6.6 billion, led to economic hardships in Germany, i.e. the economic depression of 1929-35 that led to difficulties that greatly affected the Germans, i.e. made the Germans suffer from high unemployment, high cost of living, poor standard of living and poverty, etc. 3. The treaty made Germany surrender her territories under it, i.e. Alsace and Lorraine to France, the French treasures like the art pieces, trophies and flags to France. These had been confiscated by Germany during the Franco-Prussia of 1870-71. This also further annoyed and humiliated the Germans, hence making Germany, under Adolf Hitler, to reject the treaty and its terms. 4. Germany lost all her colonies in Africa and Europe under the decolonization clause, i.e. Cameroon and Togo to France, Tanganyika to Britain, Emiria to South Africa, Ceylon to France, Europe and Malm to Belgium. This. European history, Europe after World War I of 1914-1918. 25. Instability in Germany which greatly undermined the survival of the Weimar Republic. 6. The treaty led to hyperinflation in Germany, i.e. in the wake of trying to overcome the economic crisis created by the Versailles Peace Treaty of 1919, the government reacted by printing more money due to Marx, but this instead caused severe hyperinflation. Money was increasingly becoming virtually worthless, such that workers needed to carry sacks of monies in order to buy small items. Prices shot up in a spell of minutes, among other economic disasters in Germany which increased the suffering of the Germans. 7. In 1923, Germany to France her industrial territory of Ruhr when the French and Belgian troops invaded and occupied the disputed Ruhr region and simply took what was owed to them in the form of raw materials and goods. This was legal under the Versailles Peace Treaty of 1919. Because of the treaty, the Germany Weimar Republic ordered the workers in the Ruhr region to go on strike so that they were not producing anything for the French to take. French troops reacted harshly by killing over 100 workers and expelled more than 100,000 protesters from the region. However, through the negotiations done by Stresemann, Germany's foreign minister, the French withdrew from the Ruhr region and Germany hence regained it in 1926. 8. The Versailles Peace Treaty of 1919 totally destroyed the Germany Empire, i.e. over 2 million German nationals were put under foreign rule, i.e. this made these Germans become foreigners in the newly created states, e.g. 2 million German nationals in Czechoslovakia, 2.5 in Yugoslovakia, 1 million German nationals in Poland. Under such circumstance, Germany under Adolf Hitler could accept the treaty and its terms and even forced him to attack these countries that partly caused W11 in 1939. 9. Germany was severely disarmed by the Versailles Peace Treaty of 1919. For example, she was forced to reduce her army to only 100,000 men, to have only 6 small battleships and not to have armoured vehicles and aircrafts. Her navy was reduced to 15,000 sailors. This was too small an army which could not even provide sustainable domestic security. This therefore made Germany more vulnerable to any attack than ever before. Then, the Versailles Peace Treaty of 1919 led to the rise of Nazism and Adolf Hitler in Germany in 1933, who was totally opposed to the terms of the Versailles Peace Treaty of 1919 that he considered too unfair and realistic. This made him European history, Europe after World War I of 1914-1918. 26. To become the president in 1934 when an old man Paul Hindenburg died and introduced Nazism as an ideology in Germany. 11. The Versailles Peace Treaty of 1919 led to Germany future aggression, i.e. Germany was totally dissatisfied, most especially after losing many territories and many of her nationals, and this made Germany under Adolf Hitler to attack and occupy countries like Czechoslovakia in 1938, Austria in 1938, Yugoslavia in 1938 and finally Poland in 1939, something that sparked off the outbreak of W11. Question: how did the Versailles Peace Treaty of 1919 affect Germany? Why did Germany reject the terms of the Versailles Peace Treaty of 1919? 1. The treaty was just dictated and imposed on Germany, i.e. it was a diktat. Germany was not invited and not even consulted during the discussions, i.e. she was only presented with the terms of the treaty and forced to sign it. Therefore, under circumstance, Germany was forced to reject the Versailles Peace Treaty and its terms, e.g. when Adolf Hitler rose to power, he outrightly rejected it. 2. Germany was imposed on the war guilty clause, i.e. according to Article 231 of the treaty, the entire blame for the outbreak of W1 in 1914 was put on Germany, and it clearly stated that others were innocent and victims of circumstance under German aggression, and it read in parts of by the war imposed on us by Germany. This therefore annoyed the Germans under Adolf Hitler to reject the Versailles Peace Treaty of 1919 when he rose to power in 1933. 3. Germany was made to pay war indemnity of £6.6 billion as compensation to the Allied powers. This amount of money was too much and unacceptable to Germany. Therefore, Germany was not willing to pay the whole amount, hence this made Adolf Hitler to reject the Versailles Peace Treaty of 1919 when he rose to power in 1933. 4. Germany was not happy with the terms of the Versailles Peace Treaty of 1919 and ended up rejecting them simply because she was the only country to be disarmed, e.g. according to the disarmament clause, Germany was to reduce the number of her soldiers from 4 million to 100,000 soldiers, remained with 6. European history, Europe after World War I of 1914-1918. 27 battleships, not allowed to produce tanks, warplanes, submarines, and above all she had to hand over the warships and warplanes that survived W1 to the victors, i.e. Britain and France. This situation therefore made Germany to become totally vulnerable to external attacks than ever before, hence this made Adolf Hitler to reject the Versailles Peace Treaty of 1919 and its term when Hitler rose to power in Germany in 1933. 5. Germany had been made to lose all her colonies, both Africa and Europe, by the Versailles peacemakers, i.e. Namibia to South Africa, Togo and Cameroon to France, Tanganyika to Britain, and this came to be known as the Mandate States of the LON. Germany couldn't accept all this to happen just because it would weaken her economically, hence when Adolf Hitler rose to power in 1933 he rejected the treaty and its terms, as this meant the loss of source of raw materials and market to the Germany industries. 6. The Versailles Peace Treaty making had been dominated by only 3 leading states, i.e. USA under Woodrow Wilson, Britain under George Lodi, and France under George Clemenceau, leaving out representatives of other powers like Orlando of Italy, Japan and Germany herself, and this therefore annoyed the Germans under the leadership of Adolf Hitler, something that made Germany reject the Versailles of 1919 and its terms. 7. The chairmanship of George Clemenceau was so much biased against Germany throughout the discussions and was even heard making states like make Germany pay and hang the Kaiser. Therefore, with such kind of chairmanship, the Germans could accept the Versailles Peace Treaty and its terms under Adolf Hitler's leadership. 8. Germany also rejected the Versailles Peace Treaty of 1919 and its terms simply because other powers like Italy, Japan and USA also refused to accept the treaty. This therefore gave Germany confidence and determination to reject the Versailles Peace Treaty of 1919 and its terms because even other powers had rejected it and were not supporting it. 9. The venue where the treaty was signed also made Germany reject the Versailles Peace Treaty and its terms, i.e. the Hall of Mirrors at Versailles. This was totally unacceptable to the Germans, i.e. it was not a neutral ground and was a humiliation to them because this was the very place where Germany declared herself an empire after defeating France in Napoleon 111 in the Franco-Prussian War of 1870. 1871, where she took away her 2 economic now provinces of Alsace and Lorraine and was the very place she handed them back to France. Therefore Germany under Adolf Hitler ended up rejecting the treaty and its terms. 10. Germany rejected the Versailles Peace Treaty of 1919 and its terms simply. European history, Europe after World War I of 1914-1918. 28. All it had put them in a better position to dominate European political affairs, yet it had sidelined Germany. This situation was unacceptable to Germany, especially under Adolf Hitler, because to him Germany was still a strong country and had just been stabled in the back by the Versailles peacemakers. Questions. 1. To what extent was the Versailles Peace Treaty unfair to Germany? I.e. unfairness of the treaty to Germany and fairness to other countries. Two-sided. Calls for a standpoint. 2. To what extent did Germany abide by the terms of the Versailles of 1919? Two-sided. Show acceptance of Weimar Republic accepting these terms, discussing term. / calls by term. Give reasons why Adolf Hitler rejected the treaty as standpoint. 3. The Versailles Peace Treaty of 1919 was questionable right from the start. Discuss. Two-sided.